Patrice Lumumba, born July 2, 1925, Onolua, Belgian Congo, now Democratic Republic of the Congo, died January 17, 1961, Katanga Province, African nationalist leader, the first Prime Minister of the Democratic Republic of the Congo, September 1960. Forced out of office during a political crisis, he was assassinated a short time later. Early life, education, and work. Lumumba was born in the village of Onolua in Kasai Province, Belgian Congo. He was a member of the small Batila ethnic group, a fact that became significant in his later political life. His two principal rivals, Moise Tshombe, who led the breakaway of the Katanga province, and Joseph Kasavubu, who later became the Congo's president, both came from large, powerful ethnic groups from which they derived their major support, giving their political movements a regional character. In contrast, Lumumba's movement emphasized its all-Congolese nature. After attending a Protestant mission school, Lumumba went to work in Kind-de-Port-Champagne, where he became active in the Club of the Évolués, Western-educated Africans. He began to write essays and poems for Congolese journals. He also applied for and received full Belgian citizenship. Lumumba next moved to Leopoldville, now Kinshasa, to become a postal clerk and went on to become an accountant in the post office in Stanleyville, now Kisangani. There he continued to contribute to the Congolese press. In 1955 Lumumba became regional president of a purely Congolese trade union of government employees that was not affiliated, as were other unions, to either of the two Belgian trade union federations, Socialist and Roman Catholic. He also became active in the Belgian Liberal Party in the Congo. Although conservative in many ways, the party was not linked to either of the trade union federations, which were hostile to it. In 1956 Lumumba was invited with others on a study tour of Belgium under the auspices of the Minister of Colonies. On his return he was arrested on a charge of embezzlement from the post office. He was convicted and condemned 1 year later, after various reductions of sentence, to 12 months imprisonment and a fine. When Lumumba got out of prison, he grew even more active in politics. In October 1958 he, along with other Congolese leaders, launched the Congolese National Movement, Mouvement National Congolais, MNC, the first nationwide Congolese political party. In December he attended the first All-African People's Conference in Accra, Ghana, where he met nationalists from across the African continent and was made a member of the permanent organization set up by the conference. His outlook and vocabulary, inspired by Pan-African goals, now took on the tenor of militant nationalism. As nationalist fervor increased, the Belgian government announced a program intended to lead to independence for the Congo, starting with local elections in December 1959. The nationalists regarded this program as a scheme to install puppets before independence and announced a boycott of the elections. The Belgian authorities responded with repression. On October 30 there was a clash in Stanleyville that resulted in 30 deaths. Lumumba was imprisoned on a charge of inciting to riot. The MNC decided to shift tactics, entered the elections, and won a sweeping victory in Stanleyville, 90% of the votes. In January 1960 the Belgian government convened a roundtable conference in Brussels of all Congolese parties to discuss political change, but the MNC refused to participate without Lumumba. Lumumba was thereupon released from prison and flown to Brussels. The conference agreed on a date for independence, June 30, with national elections in May. Although there was a multiplicity of parties, the MNC came out far ahead in the elections, and Lumumba emerged as the leading nationalist politician of the Congo. Maneuvers to prevent his assumption of authority failed, and he was asked to form the first government, which he did on June 24, 1960. Almost immediately after the June 30 independence date, some units of the army rebelled, largely because of objections to their Belgian commander. Moise Tshombe took advantage of the ensuing confusion, using it as an opportunity to proclaim that the mineral-rich province of Katanga was seceding from the Congo. Belgium sent in troops, ostensibly to protect Belgian nationals in the disorder, but the Belgian troops landed principally in Katanga, where they sustained Tshombe's secessionist regime. The Congo appealed to the United Nations to expel the Belgians and help them restore internal order. As Prime Minister, Lumumba did what little he could to redress the situation. His army was an uncertain instrument of power, his civilian administration untrained and untried, the United Nations forces, whose presence he had requested, were condescending and assertive, and the political alliances underlying his regime very shaky. The Belgian troops did not leave, and the Katanga secession continued. Since the United Nations forces refused to help suppress the Katangese revolt, Lumumba appealed to the Soviet Union for planes to assist in transporting his troops to Katanga. He asked the independent African states to meet in Leopoldville in August to unite their efforts behind him. His moves alarmed many, particularly the Western powers and the supporters of President Kasavubu, who pursued a moderate course in the coalition government and favored some local autonomy in the provinces. On September 5 President Kasavubu dismissed Lumumba, but the legalities of the move were immediately contested by Lumumba. As a result of the discord, there were two groups now claiming to be the legal central government. On September 14 power was seized by the Congolese army leader Col. Joseph Mobutu, later president of Zaire as Mobutu Sese Seko, who later reached a working agreement with Kasavubu. In November the General Assembly of the United Nations, UN, recognized the credentials of Kasavubu's government. The independent African states split sharply over the issue. Meanwhile, in October, Lumumba had been placed under house arrest in Leopoldville, guarded not only by Mobutu's forces but by those of the UN as well, which provided him with protection. After the General Assembly decided to recognize Kasavubu's government, Lumumba escaped from home confinement and sought to travel to Stanleyville, where his supporters had control. However, he was caught by Mobutu's forces and arrested on December 2. Lumumba was initially held at a military camp in Thiesville, now Mbanza and Gungu, but concerns that the soldiers there were sympathetic to him led Belgian, Congolese, and Catalan authorities to arrange for his transfer to a different location that they deemed to be more secure and one that would almost certainly guarantee his death. On January 17, 1961, Lumumba and two associates, Joseph Okito and Maurice Mpolo, were flown to Elizabethville, now Lubumbashi, where they were delivered to the secessionist regime in Katanga and its Belgian advisors. On the flight there, they had been beaten by the soldiers escorting them, and, once they landed in Katanga, they were beaten again. Later that day, Lumumba, Okito, and Mpolo were executed by a firing squad under Belgian command. Although their bodies were initially thrown into shallow graves, they were later dug up under the direction of Belgian officers, hacked into pieces, and dissolved in acid or burned by fire. The Catalan government withheld official announcement of his death until February 13 and then claimed that Lumumba had escaped from their custody and had been discovered by villagers, who killed him. Rumors of Lumumba's death had circulated soon after it occurred, however. The government's explanation of his death was quickly disputed, although it would take decades for the full circumstances surrounding his death to be made public. His death caused a scandal throughout Africa and beyond. Retrospectively, even his enemies proclaimed him a national hero. The reasons that Lumumba provoked such intense emotion are not immediately evident. His viewpoint was not exceptional. He was for a unitary Congo and against division of the country along ethnic or regional lines. Like many other African leaders, he supported Pan-Africanism and the liberation of colonial territories. He proclaimed his regime one of positive neutralism, which he defined as a return to African values and rejection of any imported ideology, including that of the Soviet Union. Lumumba was, however, a man of strong character who intended to pursue his policies regardless of the enemies he made within his country or abroad. The Congo, furthermore, was a key area in terms of the geopolitics of Africa, and because of its wealth, size, and proximity to white-dominated southern Africa, Lumumba's opponents had reason to fear the consequences of a radical or radicalized Congo regime. Moreover, In the context of the Cold War, the Soviet Union's support for Lumumba appeared at the time as a threat to many in the West. Lumumba, born Isai Tajumbuta, was a Congolese politician and independence leader who served as the first Prime Minister of the Democratic Republic of the Congo, then known as the Republic of the Congo, from June until September 1960, following the May 1960 election. He was the leader of the Congolese National Movement, MNC, from 1958 until his execution in January 1961. Ideologically an African nationalist and Pan-Africanist, he played a significant role in the transformation of the Congo from a colony of Belgium into an independent republic. Shortly after Congolese independence in June 1960, a mutiny broke out in the army, marking the beginning of the Congo crisis. After a coup, Lumumba attempted to escape to Stanleyville to join his supporters who had established a new anti-Mobutu state called the Free Republic of the Congo. With the help of Belgian partisans, Lumumba was captured en route by state authorities under Joseph Désiré Mobutu, sent to the state of Katanga and executed by the separatist Katanan authorities of Moise Tshombe. He was seen as a martyr for the Pan-African movement. In 2002, Belgium formally apologized for its role in the execution. After a study tour in Belgium in 1956, he was arrested on charges of embezzlement of $2,500 from the post office. He was convicted and sentenced 1 year later to 12 months imprisonment and a fine. After his release, Lumumba helped found the Mouvement National Congolese, MNC, party in 1958 and quickly became the organization's leader. Full accounts of Lumumba's life and death were printed within weeks of his demise. Beginning in 1961 and continuing for several years thereafter, some biographies on him were published. Most were highly partisan. Several early works on the Congo crisis also discussed Lumumba at length. In the years after his death, misconceptions of Lumumba persisted by both his supporters and his critics. Serious study of him faded over the following decades. Academic discussion of his legacy was largely limited until the later stages of Mobutu's rule in the Congo. Mobutu's opening of the country to multi-party politics beginning in 1990 revived interest in Lumumba's death. Belgian literature in the decades following the Congo crisis portrayed him as incompetent, demagogic, aggressive, ungrateful, undiplomatic, and communist. Most Africanists of the 20th century, such as Jean-Claude Willem, viewed Lumumba as an intransigent, unrealistic idealist without any tangible program who distanced himself from his contemporaries and alienated the Western world with radical anti-colonial rhetoric. They saw him as greatly responsible for the political crisis that resulted in his downfall. A handful of other writers, such as Jean-Paul Sartre, shared the belief that Lumumba's goals were unattainable in 1960 but nevertheless viewed him as a martyr of Congolese independence at the hands of certain Western interests and the victim of events over which he had little control. According to sociologist DeWitt, both of these perspectives overstate the political weaknesses and isolation of Lumumba. A conventional narrative of Lumumba's premiership and downfall eventually emerged. He was an uncompromising radical who provoked his own murder by angering domestic separatists. Within Belgium, the popular narrative of his death implicated the involvement of some Belgian individuals, but stressed that they were acting under orders of African figures and that the Belgian government was uninvolved. Some Belgian circles peddled the notion that the United States, particularly the Central Intelligence Agency, had arranged the killing. This narrative was challenged by DeWitt's 2001 work, The Assassination of Patrice Lumumba, which provided evidence that the Belgian government, with the complicity of the United States, the United Kingdom, and the UN, was largely responsible for his death. Media discussion of Lumumba, spurred by the release of the book as well as a feature film in 2000, Lumumba, became significantly more positive afterwards. A new narrative subsequently emerged, holding Western espionage at fault for Lumumba's death, and emphasizing the threat his charismatic appeal posed to Western interests. Lumumba's role in the Congolese independence movement is well documented, and he is typically recognized as its most important and influential leader. His exploits are usually celebrated as the work of him as an individual and not that of a larger movement. Due to his relatively short career in government, quick removal from power, and controversial death, a consensus has not been reached on Lumumba's political legacy. His downfall was detrimental to African nationalist movements, and he is generally remembered primarily for his assassination. Numerous American historians have cited his death as a major contributing factor to the radicalization of the American civil rights movement in the 1960s, and many African American activist organizations and publications used public comment on his death to express their ideology. Popular memory of Lumumba has often discarded his politics and reduced him to a symbol. Within the Congo, Lumumba is primarily portrayed as a symbol of national unity, while abroad he is usually cast as a Pan-Africanist and anti-colonial revolutionary. The ideological legacy of Lumumba is known as Lumumbism, French for Lumumbism. Rather than a complex doctrine, it is usually framed as a set of fundamental principles consisting of nationalism, Pan-Africanism, non-alignment, and social progressivism. 218 Mobutism built off of these principles. Congolese university students who had up until independence held little respect for Lumumba embraced Lumumbism after his death. According to political scientist Georges Nzongola-Ntalaja, Lumumba's greatest legacy, for the Congo is the ideal of national unity. Nzongola-Ntalaja further posited that, as a result of Lumumba's high praise of the independence movement and his work to end the Congolese secession, the people of the Congo are likely to remain steadfast in their defense of national unity and territorial integrity, come hell or high water. Political scientist Ali Mazrui wrote, "It looks as if the memory of Lumumba may contribute more to the oneness of the Congolese than anything Lumumba himself actually did while he was still alive." Following the suppression of the rebellions of 1964 and 1965, most Lumumbist ideology was confined to isolated groups of intellectuals who faced repression under Mobutu's regime. By 1966 there was little popular devotion to him outside of the political elite. Centers of Lumumba's popularity in his lifetime underwent a gradual decline in fidelity to his person and ideas. According to Africanist Bogomil Josiwiki, by 1999 the only faithful surviving Lumumbist nucleus is located in Sankuru and Manyema, and its loyalty is questionable, more ethnical, regional, and sentimental than ideological and political. Lumumba's image was unpopular in southern Kasai for years after his death, as many Baluba remained aware of the military campaign he ordered in August 1960 that resulted in violent atrocities against their people. At least a dozen Congolese political parties have claimed to bear Lumumba's political and spiritual heritage. Despite this, few entities have attempted or succeeded in incorporating his ideas into a comprehensible political program. Most of these parties have enjoyed little electoral support, though Gaizenga's Parti Lumumbiste Unify was represented in the Congolese coalition government formed under President Joseph Kabila in 2006. Aside from student groups, Lumumbist ideals play only a minor role in current Congolese politics. Congolese presidents Mobutu, Laurent Desire Kabila and Joseph Kabila all claim to inherit Lumumba's legacy and paid tribute to him early on in their tenures. The circumstances of Lumumba's death have led him to often be portrayed as a martyr. While his demise led to an outburst of mass demonstrations abroad and quick creation of a martyr image internationally, the immediate reaction to his death in the Congo was not as uniform. Tidala, Sanjai, and Lubakatanga peoples created folk songs of mourning for him, but these were groups which had been involved in political alliances with him and, at the time, Lumumba was unpopular in large segments of the Congolese populace, particularly in the capital, Bas-Congo, Katanga, and South Kasai. Some of his actions and the portrayal of him as a communist by his detractors had also generated disaffection in the army, civil service, labor unions, and the Catholic Church. Lumumba's reputation as a martyr in the collective memory of the Congolese was only cemented later, partly due to the initiatives of Mobutu. In Congolese collective memory, it is perceived that Lumumba was killed through Western machinations because he defended the Congo's self-determination. The killing is viewed in the context of the memory as a symbolic moment in which the Congo lost its dignity in the international realm and the ability to determine its future, which has since been controlled by the West. Lumumba's determination to pursue his goals is extrapolated upon the Congolese people as their own. Securing the Congo's dignity and self-determination would thus ensure their redemption from victimization by Western powers. Historian David Van Raybrouck wrote, "In no time Lumumba became a martyr of decolonisation. He owed this status more to the horrible end of his life than to his political successes." Journalist Michele Arong remarked that he really did become a hero after his death, in a way that one has to wonder if he would have been such a hero if he had remained and run the country and faced all the problems that running a country as big as Congo would have inevitably brought. Drama scholar Piet de Freyer wrote, "Lumumba as a dead martyr has become a more compelling figure in liberationist discourse than the controversial live politician." Historian Pedro Monaville wrote that his globally iconic status was not commensurate with his more complex legacy in the Congo. Co-optation of Lumumba's legacy by Congolese presidents and state media has generated doubts in the Congolese public about his reputation. In 1961 Adula became Prime Minister of the Congo. Shortly after assuming office he went to Stanleyville and laid a wreath of flowers at an impromptu monument established for Lumumba. After Tshombe became Prime Minister in 1964, he also went to Stanleyville and did the same. On June 30, 1966, Mobutu rehabilitated Lumumba's image and proclaimed him a national hero. He declared a series of other measures meant to commemorate Lumumba, though few of these were ever executed aside from the release of a banknote with his visage the subsequent year. This banknote was the only paper money during Mobutu's rule that bore the face of a leader other than the incumbent president. In following years state mention of Lumumba declined and Mobutu's regime viewed unofficial tributes to him with suspicion. Following Laurent Desire Kabila's seizure of power in the 1990s, a new line of Congolese francs was issued bearing Lumumba's image. In January 2003, Joseph Kabila, who succeeded his father as president, inaugurated a statue of Lumumba. In Guinea, Lumumba was featured on a coin and 2 regular banknotes despite not having any national ties to the country. This was an unprecedented occurrence in the modern history of national currency, as images of foreigners are normally reserved only for specially released commemorative money. As of 2020, Lumumba has been featured on 16 different postage stamps. Many streets and public squares around the world have been named after him. The People's Friendship University of Russia in Moscow, then People's Friendship University of the USSR, was renamed Patrice Lumumba People's Friendship University in 1961. It was renamed again in 1992 and back in 2023. In 2013, the planned community of Lumumbaville was named after him. Lumumba is viewed as one of the fathers of independence of the Congo. The image of Lumumba appears frequently in social media and is often used as a rallying cry in demonstrations of social defiance. His figure is prevalent in art and literature, mostly outside of the Congo. He was referenced by numerous African American writers of the American Civil Rights Movement, especially in their works of the post-civil rights era. Malcolm X declared him the greatest black man who ever walked the African continent. Numerous songs and plays have been dedicated to Lumumba. Many praise his character, contrasting it with the alleged irresponsible and undisciplined nature of the Congolese people. Thank you for watching this video.